While in the early afternoon of November 7th, Slivnitsa drowns in blood and gunpowder smoke, somewhere out there upon the cold waves of the Danube, the immortal verses are born that will send shivers of patriotic fervor through generations of Bulgarians. In those very same fateful days of November 1885, an Austrian steamboat cuts through the river on its way to the fatherland. On its deck, amidst the anxious whispers of returning students burning with desire to help save their homeland, 22-year-old Cvetan Radoslavov, as if sensing the momentous weight of this day and hour, fixes his eyes on the silhouette of the Bulgarian shore and writes history. Literally on his knee, the first lines of Gorda Stara Planina are born, the future national anthem that will echo through the ages. At the same time, the fate of the young Bulgarian Principality seems dark and uncertain. Along the entire 20-kilometer front at Slivnitsa, a fierce battle rages, in which the superior Serbian army attempts to finally break the Bulgarian spirit. The clear blue sky quickly turns black from the smoke of hundreds of cannons, while tens of thousands of bayonets flash in the autumn sun. While on the far left flank, near the village of Gurguliat, Captain Popov's detachment heroically tries to prevent the Morava division from reaching the rear of the Bulgarian position. On the right flank, around the Tree Ushi heights, a true rain of lead pours down. The Bulgarian companies, disorganized and having already lost a large portion of their officers, continue slowly and relentlessly to encircle the two eastern peaks in iron pincers, causing unimaginable turmoil in the ranks of the Danube division. Dr. Jovan Jokic, a military doctor from the 7th Infantry Regiment of this division, would later recall, on November 7th, the Danube division suffered a catastrophe. Absolute chaos reigned. Everyone was stunned and bewildered by what was happening. At the same time, Colonel Miskovic, commander of the Drina division, descends across the plain to reinforce the shaken Danube division on the heights, sending the entire 4th Regiment against the left flank of the attacking Bulgarians. All these troop movements of the Drina division do not go unnoticed by the Western Corps headquarters, as they are clearly visible from the Bulgarian center. It becomes obvious to everyone at HQ that the flank must be supported by the center, but lacking reserves to eliminate any risk, the Bulgarian officers hesitate to take such a step. Should the center advance and fail, the entire front could collapse, making a retreat of the flanks impossible. Yet, on the other hand, the need to reinforce the right flank is desperate. Corps Commander Major Gujev is convinced that the center must advance, but he does not dare make such a critical decision on his own. On the other hand, the ordinary soldiers from the center burn with desire to rush to the aid of their comrades storming the Tree Ushi heights. Arthur von Hune would write in his diary, benefiting from experience, the Bulgarian soldiers were already convinced that the Serbs feared their bayonets. They, therefore, were inspired by a striving to approach the Serbs as much as possible in order to attack them with bayonets. As a consequence, Captain Olimpi Panov telegraphs the Minister of War Nikiforov and demands from the Prince or the Army Chief of Staff an order for an advance through the center. The Army Chief of Staff, Captain РачоПетров, is of the opinion not to attack, but since he is not at Slivnitsa to know the situation, he does not want to impose his will, and therefore telegraphs, His Highness ordered regarding the advance of the center to act as you see fit. In Slivnitsa, where everyone clearly sees the advance of the Drina division towards Tree Ushi, they interpret the telegram as permission to attack. The Corps headquarters decides to let forward the 3rd and 4th battalions of the Pleven Regiment and the 2nd Battalion of the Danube Regiment, which are to advance straight ahead, while the 3rd Battalion of the Danube Regiment is to descend into the field north of the road, striving to establish contact with the units at Tree Ushi. At this fateful moment, when the Serbian Drina Division and the Bulgarian Center intervene in the actions that will decide the war, the forces of the combatants on both sides are exceptionally unequal. The defenders have 22 companies and 16 guns in the center, while the attackers can throw against them 38 companies and 42 guns, a crushing superiority. Given this Serbian superiority, the attack of the Bulgarian right flank and center is not only risky, but also difficult to justify. Any military expert would conclude that the Bulgarians were needlessly putting their military fortunes on the line. But despite the unequal forces, another factor, often neglected by military specialists, would once again play a decisive role, namely the fighting spirit and unwavering morale of the ordinary Bulgarian soldiers. With their relentless advance up the slopes of Three Ushi, left almost without officers, these fearless men had already drawn to themselves all the reserves of the Serbian Danube Division, as well as the entire 4th Regiment of the Drina Division. Crawling upwards with terrifying determination, with thinned ranks and disorganized reserves, the Bulgarian companies look like a formidable wave that will soon flood the eastern 2 peaks of Three Ushi. The commander of the 8th Company from the 2nd Vidin Battalion, Lieutenant Ivan Dikov, would later write in his memoirs, "The bullets were literally falling like hail and were taking men out of action every minute. But could this agitated mass, which despised death and had only one desire, to crush the enemy, be stopped?" At the most critical moment, the commander of the right flank, Captain Benderev, brings out the last reserves and advances north of the heights into the valley of Malo Malovo, threatening the Serbian positions with a wide encirclement of their northern flank. These bold actions further unsettle Colonel Horstig, who senses that his retreat route will be cut off in this way. At that time, the 4th Struma Battalion also arrived on the northern flank, and the Bulgarians begin to cheer "Hurrah!" as they usually do when help arrives. Right at this moment, the Vidin troops manage to envelop the Serbs from the south as well. From this close position, they open rapid fire, which the Serbs fail to withstand. The 1st Vidin Company, under the command of Lieutenant Kirkov, which had managed to slip 50 meters into the flank of the Serbs, unnoticed behind them, delivers a surprising, powerful volley along the length of the Serbian trenches. Shocked, the Serbs flee headlong, and the Vidin Company charges after them with bayonets to the cry of "Hurrah!" which is picked up by all Bulgarian units scattered across the heights. The powerful, inhuman cry of "Hurrah!" spreads to the northern slopes of Three Ushi as well, where the 1st Danube Battalion also charges with bayonets. To its right, the 4th Struma Battalion deploys. Lieutenant Dikov describes the fateful moment. The battle was desperate on both sides. One could see how their reinforcement columns were coming from down in the plain. The situation indeed was critical. Because if those reinforcements managed to reach them, they could launch an offensive and push us back with heavy losses and in disorder. All this mass climbing toward the peak momentarily stopped and hesitated. Fortune was put on the line and could be lost, but the shouts that our own men were coming to help cheered them up, and once again, with even greater fury, they rushed toward this peak. This terrifying sight of the approaching muddy and bloody Bulgarians with gleaming bayonets definitively crushes the stubbornness of the Serbs on the northern peak. Pressed at the front, enveloped from the south by the triumphant Bulgarians, and seeing from the north Benderev's encirclement with the 1st Plovdiv Battalion, which with quick steps and shouts of "Hurrah!" deploys straight against the left Serbian flank, they retreat in panic along the entire line. Thus, shortly after noon on this November 7th, the Bulgarian companies, having already lost almost a third of their personnel, capture the 2 eastern peaks of Three Ushi. The Serbs retreat in disorder to the west, thus, albeit in great confusion, managing to create a new barrier for the Bulgarians on the western peak of Three Ushi. The commander of the Drina Division, seeing the fleeing Serbian battalions on the slopes to the north, spurs his 4th Regiment to hasten their march, ordering them to strike the flank of the Bulgarians, who are preparing for a final assault on the western peak of Three Ushi. At this point, any hesitation about an attack in the center vanishes from the Bulgarian headquarters. It is now clear that the Drina division must be stopped at all costs. The Bulgarian soldiers from the center, who anxiously follow the unequal fight on the heights, can barely wait for the signal to attack. To the thunderous sounds of Shumi Maritsa, the companies from the center advance in the same order in which they are deployed at the position. First moves the 3rd Pleven Battalion, which is in the middle. The Pleven soldiers advance with such drive and enthusiasm under the hail of bullets and shrapnel that in a matter of minutes they gain almost a kilometer and almost reach the Serbian positions. To its left advances the 4th Pleven Battalion in the same formation, while the 2nd Danube Battalion charges to the right. The commander of the 5th Company of this desperate attack, 25-year-old Lieutenant Vladimir Serafimov, would later describe this desperate attack. A person cannot imagine that hopeless and helpless state of a military unit forced to move against a concealed enemy who mercilessly shoots them down like targets from 300-400 paces. I found the cadet from the 7th Company, Boyan Botev, who was wounded in the groin, from which wound he subsequently died. Indeed, the younger brother of national hero Hristo Botev displays extraordinary heroism in the battles at Slivnitsa, where he is wounded in the stomach and pierced in 2 places by a bayonet, yet despite this fells 2 enemy soldiers with his saber. This worthy son of Bulgaria follows his older brother's legacy to his last breath and dies from his severe wounds in Sofia on November 10th. He who falls in battle for freedom, he does not die. Dozens more nameless Bulgarian heroes fall during this desperate attack on the central sector. By order of the commander of the 4th Pleven Regiment, Captain Petrov, the artillery pieces are also moved forward and shower the Serbian trenches with deadly fire. At this moment, 3 battalions of the 6th Serbian Regiment hurl themselves into the flank of the advancing Bulgarian battalions, which occupy too broad a front and have separated from one another. The commander of the 3rd Pleven Battalion, Captain Lazarov, spreads half a company into a skirmish line to extend the threatened left flank. In this way, the battalion's front reaches 1.5 kilometers, a width difficult to defend. Meanwhile, the Serbs reinforce the battle line with another battalion from the freshly arrived 5th Regiment, which descends onto the flank of the Pleven soldiers. 2nd Lieutenant Georgievich from this regiment vividly recalls, "When the fray ended, soldiers rushed to the aid of the corporal, and when they lifted him, they saw he was dead, pierced by a Bulgarian dagger that was firmly clenched in the fist of an equally dead Bulgarian officer." At this critical moment, the commander of the 15th Company from the 4th Pleven Battalion, Lieutenant Servitsev, leads his soldiers in a bayonet charge to prevent the encirclement of the advanced 3rd Pleven Battalion. The Serbs, whose commander is already severely wounded, turn and flee on seeing the impetuous advance of the Bulgarians. 52 men from their skirmish line are taken prisoner, the rest fall killed or wounded, and the entire Serbian battalion retreats. Almost at the same time, the entire 6th Serbian Regiment advances in a new attempt to envelop the right flank of the storming 3rd Pleven Battalion. Here, however, is the 8th Danube Company, which has become separated from its battalion. The company commander, 2nd Lieutenant Stoyanov, finds himself in a difficult position. He can receive help neither from the Pleven Battalion, stretched across 1.5 kilometers, nor from his own battalion, deployed against Three Ushi, nor from the weak 3rd Danube Battalion, advancing north of the highway against the 4th Serbian Regiment. In this fateful moment, the Bulgarian headquarters sends to their aid the last reserve on the left flank, the 3rd Haskovo Battalion. These barefoot boys, who had arrived at Slivnitsa the previous night after a 2-day inhuman march, carried 2 per horse from Sofia and immediately buried their frozen feet in the village manure heaps to warm them, now throw themselves into battle with song on their lips and close the gap in the Bulgarian battle line. The Haskovo troops run toward the Serbian positions and deliver several rapid volleys, and since the Serbs do not retreat, Captain Dobrev orders a bayonet charge. The Bulgarians advance energetically with shouts of hurrah, but the Serbs do not await the clash and retreat in disorder. In this heroic attack, the commander of the 8th Danube Company, 2nd Lieutenant Stoyanov, falls wounded, and by order of the battalion commander, the company remains under Captain Dobrev's command. Thus, on this sunny autumn afternoon, the Bulgarian battalions in the center must withstand the pressure of vastly superior Serbian forces. They manage to hold off the counterattack at the cost of continuous rapid fire, but by around 2 o'clock, their ammunition begins to run out. This causes anxiety among the central unit, threatening to turn into a retreat. The Western Corps headquarters reacts instantly and orders the commandant of Slivnitsa, Captain Yonkov, to load as many pack horses as available with ammunition and dispatch them to the center. Lacking pack animals, Captain Yonkov sends carts and carriages intended for transporting the wounded instead. According to orders from HQ, the carts and carriages are to drive along the Tsaribrod highway and unload the ammunition behind the battle line, from where the units are supposed to load it onto their own horses. However, as the units have no such horses at this crucial moment, the carts and carriages deliver the ammunition right to the firing line under a hail of bullets. But while the Bulgarians stabilize the right flank of the center, a new danger appears on its left flank. Units of the Shumadja division advance directly against this flank. The Bulgarian center, 4 battalions and 2 half-batteries, is already fighting against the entire Drina division, 9 battalions and 7 batteries. And, of course, there can be no question of detaching troops against the Shumadja forces who threaten the rear of the advancing central units from the south. The commander of the Shumadja division, Colonel Banitsky, seeing the difficulties and failure of the Drina division, finally decides to rush to their aid and throws the entire 11th Serbian regiment into the open space formed between the left flank of the advancing center and the main fortified position. At this moment, only the 2nd Battery, the Tsaribrod Home Guard, 2 companies of volunteers, and the 3 companies of the 1st Preslav Battalion remain at the position. These are the only forces that, in the event of failure, must secure the center, the key to the position. The worst fears of the Corps headquarters are about to become a grim reality. And then, for the 3rd consecutive day, the far-sighted commander of the left sector of the position, Captain Mikhail Savov, comes to the aid of the center. With impressive tactical maturity, the young officer who closely follows the combat actions across the entire front makes the right decision once again. Having provided indispensable aid to Captain Popov at Gurgulyat earlier in the day, Savov now turns his attention north toward the attacking Bulgarian center and decides to force the 11th Serbian Regiment to halt its advance. To this end, he sends 5 Struma and Preslav companies to attack the advancing Serbs in the flank. Captain Stilyan Kovachev, a future general of the infantry, would later recall, "Only Captain Savov and I were left. A hail of bullets was pouring around us. Every second we expected someone to collapse from his horse. In those truly dangerous minutes, Captain Savov reached into his breast, pulled out a portrait of his future wife, kissed it, and said,
"Това е може би последната ми целувка."
And then he gave the order for a counterattack. Although under fire, the Preslav soldiers emerged from the redoubt and lunette, advancing with a discipline that always distinguished this regiment, whether in drill or in battle. The companies reach within 400 meters of the Serbs, hit the ground, and open terrifying fire. The 11th Serbian Regiment, which is already a mere 300 meters from the trenches of the 1st Preslav Battalion and the Tsaribrod Home Guard, is forced to stop and turn its front to the south. In this way, the Bulgarians prevent the Serbs from penetrating the earthworks of the Bulgarian center, and the situation in this sector turns into a positional firefight. And so, while south of Triushi, a life-or-death struggle is waged between the Bulgarian center, left flank and extreme left flank against the Drina, Shumavia and Morava divisions, the Bulgarian attack on Triushi and to the north continues. Following the fall of the northern peak of Triushi, Captain Benderev directs the composite battalion, 3 companies of the 1st Plovdiv and 1 company of the 4th Struma battalion, against the Serbs on Petrovsky Karst peak on Chepan mountain. Despite the extreme steepness of Chepan, the Plovdiv soldiers ascend at a run, advancing in a single line. Guided and encouraged in this manner by their young company commanders, 2nd Lieutenant Svinarov, Minchev and Dinkov, the companies approach the ridge where the 2nd Battalion of the 15th Serbian Regiment is entrenched. As soon as the 1st Company comes within 200 meters, the company commander, 2nd Lieutenant Svinarov, bursts into Shumi Maritsa at the top of his lungs. The soldiers, though breathless from the steep slope, take up the song, charge with bayonets, and with shouts of hurrah, hurl themselves upon the Serbs, who here too do not await the blow and abandon their trenches in headlong flight. And at this precise moment begins the assault that will definitively crush Serbian ambitions for a reversal on the battlefield and decide the war, the attack on the western peak of Triushi. The capture of the southern peak, then the northern, and finally the attack on the western peak of Triushi are not deliberate operations, each executed according to a pre-arranged plan and followed by a pause to prepare the next. If Bulgarian military thought chose and fortified Slivnitsa, if it concentrated the troops there, if finally the capture of Mekatsrev and the eastern peaks of Triushi was due to the genius of the commanders, then indisputably the most critical moment in the war, the capture of the western peak of Triushi, is owed to the individual Bulgarian himself, whether commander or subordinate. In this operation there is neither a grand design nor unity of command. The flank commander, Captain Benderev, is on Chepan. Captain Marinov is mortally wounded, and his assistant, Captain Kargiev, also wounded, is disabled. A breakdown of command ensues. Furthermore, companies within battalions and men within companies are unimaginably intermingled. Whenever a battalion or company commander falls dead, the battalion or company vanishes, and the companies or men mingle with other units. Officers command not their own troops, but whichever soldiers are around them. The companies sent forward, writes the Chief of Staff of the Western Corps, turned into groups of soldiers who advanced on their own, because they knew that as long as the enemy stood before them, the fight would cease. A single signal to attack, a hurrah from anywhere, a single forward movement from any unit was followed by all nearby units. The soldiers, in complete disorder, like a swarm of bees, rushed forward, and this was an attack the enemy could not withstand and retreat from. Once the first line moved forward, those behind followed instinctively. Battle organization, leadership, and preparation for the attack had no place here. The Bulgarians remained for 2 full hours, exchanging fire with the Serbs without receiving any order whatsoever. At that moment, as if from the blue heavens, the signal of advance is heard. The commander of the 2nd Vidin Battalion, Captain Toshev, and the commander of the 1st Pleven Battalion, Captain Ivanov, also observe the advance of the center from Triushi. Toshev turns to his comrade. "Come on, Ivanov, you drive those companies, I'll drive these, and let whatever happens, happen." The skirmish line, or rather the swarm of wasps, advances towards the Serbian positions with terrible shouts and fierce threats. By this time, the Serbs concentrate a huge amount of infantry on the western peak of Triushi, a total of 12 battalions. The 3 Lahit batteries of the Danube division occupy a position on the northwestern extension of the hill, while the Kruk battery holds the southwestern extension of the hill. In other words, 33 Bulgarian companies with completely intermingled ranks of Pleven, Viden, Struma and Danube men hurled themselves recklessly against 48 Serbian companies. despite the large amount of infantry the Serbs mass on Triushi, they are morally shaken. On the western peak of Triushi, the Serbian battalions are pinned among the rocks by Bulgarian artillery and infantry fire, struck both by shells and by flying stone fragments. At this moment, a signal to attack is heard once again from out of nowhere. The 2nd Pleven Battalion rushes down the ridge of the saddle with a cry of hurrah. The right flank takes up the cheer and advances decisively. The Serbs once again that day do not await the impact and flee backward. The 1st battalions of the 7th and 9th Serbian regiments stop only in front of Dragoman, while the others hold on at the northwestern and southwestern spurs of Triushi until the artillery retreats. From the former, they are driven out by the 1st Vidin Battalion, which advances in orderly reserve and now steps forward, while from the latter they are dispersed with a bayonet charge by the 3rd Danube Battalion. In this exchange of fire, Lieutenant Bobev also falls killed, heroically encouraging his boys to hold the position. Meanwhile, the chief of the Serbian operational section telegraphs the Supreme Command in Pirot. Our forces are abandoning the key to the position. The battle appears lost. I will try to secure the retreat. And so, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on November 7th, the Serbs are definitively pushed out of even the westernmost heights of Triushi after an hours-long carnage. At this historical hour, the final fatal blow to the Serbs is delivered on the opposite extreme left flank of the front, where the commander of the 1st Sofia Regiment, Captain Popov, heroically holds off the Morava Division near Gurgulyat. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a horseman brings an order directly from the Commander-in-Chief, Prince Alexander, written early in the morning on his way to Sofia, which reads, "Resist to the uttermost, cut off the road to Sofia and Slivnitsa. Help will reach you soon. Alexander." The supreme attention emboldens both commanders and subordinates, and after the arrival of 3 more companies as reinforcement from Captain Savov, a decision is made for a general attack.
Ще атакуваме, момчета!
At 4 o'clock, from the right sector, Lieutenant Makedonsky gives the signal to attack. The signal is repeated by all buglers. 10 minutes later, the drums beat for the assault, and the entire Bulgarian battle formation moves forward firing. The fire from both sides once again reaches its maximum. The first hurrah is heard from the companies of the right sector, and soon it carries along the whole front. The Serbs await the bayonet charge only at the heights around the village of Gurgulyat, but are soon turned to flight before the fierce Bulgarian ranks. The remaining Serbian units, seeing their fate, retreat in disorder and withdraw all the way to the Krivi Kolnik ridge above Breznik. Meanwhile, the villagers of Gurgulyat, hidden until then, as soon as they see the Bulgarians attacking toward the village, emerge from their houses and attack the Serbs with rifles, axes, hoes, and the like. Near the village, the Bulgarians surround the 2 companies that the commander of the Morava Division had sent to reinforce his right flank, and the company commanders, along with part of the soldiers, are taken prisoner. Thus, at the end of the day, the Bulgarian victory at Gurgulyat is complete. It definitively eliminates the deadly threat of encirclement of the Bulgarian positions from the south, while Captain Popov, with his skillful management of the troops, turns the battle into a model for the rapid deployment of units in a meeting engagement. The epic battle on this 7th of November is the bloodiest in the Serbo-Bulgarian War. The greatest losses occur on the 2 flanks where the most decisive fighting takes place. Through the dressing stations of the Danube Division alone pass over 500 men, not counting the self-inflicted injuries, all in the fingers of the left hand. Serbian casualties amount to more than 2,100 killed, wounded, and captured, while Bulgarian casualties reach up to 1,800 killed and wounded. Lieutenant Dikov, who was wounded in the leg, continues with his memories. The victims bear witness to how fierce the fight on Triushi was. The 8th Company alone gave myself, the NCO, the Sergeant Major, and nearly 50 soldiers wounded or killed on the spot, almost a quarter of the company. The losses were quite severe, but what was gained that day justified everything. At the dressing station, a complete slaughterhouse, men were strewn about like slaughtered sheep, while the doctors, sleeves rolled up, did their work like butchers. Further on, I was brought into a room where several officers lay, among them our Marinov. He managed to open his eyes and asked me in a weak voice, "You here too?" I wept upon seeing him. His wound was most dangerous, poor Marinov. Later, when he died in Sofia, everyone, both military and civilians, mourned for him. We, the Vidin men, lost an irreplaceable commander, and the Bulgarian army, one of its most valiant and accomplished officers, from whom great things were expected. At the same time, the Serbian divisions retreat in panic, and Dr. Jokic notes with sadness, "In front of Triushi stretches a wide plain, and upon it one could see the sad picture of the Serbs. Wherever you turned, soldier after soldier, but unfortunately all retreating. Every soldier, every officer had lost faith that we could withstand the enemy assault. That state had set in, thanks to which an army can be beaten most easily, and that is the all too familiar panic. Blessed is the army that does not know this unfortunate word." Later that evening, the commander of the 6th Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Ostojic, would summarize what happened to the assembled officers even more succinctly and vividly. "Did you not see what happened? The Danube men abandoned the heights and fled like old women, a disgrace.
Напустили су висове и побегли као преплашене бабе.
Срамота.
Topolovic's Morava division did not arrive.
Topalovićeva Moravska divizija se uopšte nije pojavila.
And as for that Banyiki with his Shumadia men, we must either force him to fight or strip him of his command." And while the Serbian command is consumed by despair, a triumphant hurrah echoes across the Bulgarian positions, and the exhausted soldiers greet Prince Alexander, singing Shumi Maritsa at the top of their lungs. Arthur von Hun, who steadfastly follows the suite of the Bulgarian commander-in-chief, would vividly recall, "We arrived in Slivnitsa around 5 o'clock, where the news of the great victory was confirmed to us. From the cheerful faces of the officers, we immediately noticed that the day was a very happy one. Lo and behold, a thunderous cheer suddenly erupted from the right flank, announcing the arrival of the prince. In a minute, we were beside the prince. He embraced Gudjev and kissed him, thanking the officers once again. I was stunned with joy. The news of the victory surprised me more than if King Milan himself had stepped before me. On this day, the Bulgarian masses rolled forward like waves upon a stormy sea, driving back the Serbs everywhere until darkness halted their movement. The third battle at Slivnitsa was over and brought about the final defeat of the Serbs. The defense was over. Now a new act in the history of this war began. The roles had changed. The defense turned to the Serbs and the offense to the Bulgarians. And indeed, at the end of this memorable day, the roles are reversed and a new phase in this bloody war begins. Will the young Bulgarian officers manage to organize the exhausted battalions for offensive actions, which are immeasurably more complex than defensive ones? Will they once again display their unsuspected tactical and organizational skills to supply 40,000 men with everything necessary and push the invader off the sacred Bulgarian land? And why, in fact, will the Serbian commander-in-chief, King Milan, flee even farther from the front for a second time tonight, leaving Pirot toward Niš? While somewhere out there, a steamboat cuts through the waves of the quiet white Danube, and the lips of young philosophy student Svetan Rodoslavov murmur his declaration of love to his precious fatherland. Dear motherland, you are earthly paradise. Your beauty, your charm, they have no end.